Salut! Hi guys, this is Weasel. Welcome to the third video in the Beating the Micro series. Hopefully you had a chance to check out the third article, which was talking about hand reading and how, although many people think it is some mystical process where you look into your opponent's soul, it's actually a completely logical and rational process which involves elements of psychology. Today we are going to be trying out some of our hand reading skills, mainly by playing a loose aggressive style. We will be considering the basics of how to play loose aggressive. The main feature in loose aggressive play, and the main reason why many people try to play loose aggressive but don't succeed, is they just don't have strong enough hand reading skills. It's vital to be able to hand read well in order to play loose aggressive. You will see, looking at my stats posted on the forum, that I typically play a very tight aggressive style, somewhere around 2016, and you might also notice that my 3-bet percentage is quite low. The reason being, I like to limit variance. There is no need to 3-bet too much at the micros. The key thing is that something like your 3-bet range is balanced. So if you want to add certain value hands to that 3-bet range, you then need to balance it by adding an amount of bluffs. But you can vary quite widely the 3-bet percentage. And the reason I typically play a tight aggressive style is it's easier to play many tables at once. And in fact, your hourly rate is likely to be higher playing a large amount of tables with the tight aggressive style than it's going to be playing slightly less tables with a loose aggressive style. But today, since we're just playing 4 tables of 10NL on stars, we are going to consider the basics of loose aggressive play. And the first thing you will notice is that we are going to be opening all buttons and cutoffs a lot wider than we would if we were playing tight aggressive. Also, if we suspect the big blind is a tight player, we are going to be pretty much opening any 2 cards from the small blind and hoping to show a profit through steals. For example, table 4, we open the 5-3 offsuit, expecting to take the blinds down a reasonable amount of the time. The flop comes 10-6-3. It's quite a dry board. It's quite possible the big blind has missed this flop. We are going to make a c-bet attempt, not for value, mainly to protect our equity against any overcard type hands and hope to take the pot down. Table 3, we pick up ace-8 suited. The button open raises, and so far the button has been folding 100% of 3-bets. The small blind calls. We don't know how he's responding to 3-bets, but it's likely he would have re-raised a strong hand himself. This is a good spot for a squeeze attempt as a bluff. Table 4, we can definitely open the ace-6 suited from the cutoff. The button is short stacked, but so far he hasn't been playing many hands. We do flop top pair. We decide to go immediately for value. As discussed in earlier articles, this is not a board or a hand where we can expect 3 streets of value, but we are going to bet the flop in this case. There is a flush draw out there, and there are worse hands that can call, and we take it down. Table 3, we are just going to fold the 6-4 offsuit. I do have some reads on the players. Table 3, in the on the left, on table 3, we have Drongo90, who at first I assumed was a nit, since he's playing very tight. As the session progressed, I did actually change my opinion. I think he's probably quite a solid, tight aggressive player. At first I was expecting him to fold a lot, but I do think despite his tight stats he was playing back quite wide when he realized I was trying to steal a lot against his blinds. So don't be afraid to change your viewpoint of a certain player type as new information comes to light. On table 3, still under the impression he is a nit, I'm definitely going to be stealing his big blind with 4-3 offsuit. He's been playing 4-4 so far over 24 hands. It is of course highly possible he is just card dead on this table, and he may well be playing a number of other tables. Until I know anything further about him, I'm definitely going to be open raising 100% of small blinds against him. Table 4, we have ace-jack suited. Table 3, we open raise the ace-queen offsuit from the cutoff. And we open the ace-jack on table 1. And we open the button with the king-jack on table 2. Table 4, the button open raises to 2.5x. So far he does seem as if he is playing quite tightly, therefore we are going to flat, assuming the small blind doesn't 3-bet, which he does. In this particular spot, when the button opens and the small blind 3-bets, you should really be folding a hand like ace-jack or ace-jack suited. Your only other real option is to 4-bet, in which case you have to understand that you are 4-betting as a bluff. And in this case the small blind is short stacked and he has a low fold to 3-bet. It's unlikely he's going to be folding to a 4-bet either, given his stack size. So we just muck the ace-jack suited. Table 1, we do flop top pair. We are just going to go for value, hope to get called by worse pocket pairs, some flush draws. Table 4, we open the Queen 7 offsuit in the small blind. So far the big blind has not been playing back. It's also worth noting that he is sitting at 40 big blinds. Also, he is from Spain, and although you shouldn't put too much emphasis on where different players are from, you will sometimes see certain patterns. And one thing to take note of is there are a lot of short stackers from Spain. If you see someone from Spain and they're sitting short stacked, it's likely they are playing a short stack strategy rather than just sitting short stacked. We do forward the video slightly. I will say I don't think these are great tables, so a lot of them have tight regulars on, and sometimes the action is literally everyone just folding their blinds all the time. We do skip forward to try and find some hands. Table 2, middle position open raises. We don't know too much about him. We decide to make a 3-bet bluff. It does look slightly stronger against his middle position opening range. One thing to note is, if you were ever planning to flat a hand like 9-8 suited here, which you could well do, I would just prefer to know a little bit more about middle positions post-flop strategy as to whether I'd have enough fold equity to make it profitable to flat 9-8 suited. If I thought it was profitable to flat 9-8 suited here, I definitely wouldn't be 3-betting. The reason being, and it's a little bit of an advanced concept, if it's profitable to flat this hand and you 3-bet instead, you are then throwing away the EV you would have by flatting. Whereas if it's not profitable to flat and you decide to 3-bet with that hand, you are adding EV to a hand you would otherwise be folding. In this case, I'm not too happy about flattening the 9 suited here without further information, so I'm adding EV to the hand by turning it into a 3-bet bluff. It's also quite a nice looking hand. We should be able to hit some flops and hopefully aggressively semi-bluff this hand with certain draws after the flop. The flop comes 5-6-3 with a flush draw. We do have a gut shot. We also have 2 overcards. It's also highly possible that middle position's calling range has completely missed this flop. True, some of the time he will have overpairs, but also he can easily have a hand like ace-king or ace-jack, in which case, 1, we may take it down with a bet, and 2, our overcards may even be live outs, and of course we do have a gut shot out. We're definitely going to c-bet this flop and hope to take it down. Table 4, we are in a similar situation. I decide I don't really want to be flatting the 8-6 suited here, and we decide to make a 3-bet bluff. In general, most of your 3-bet bluffs should be against the cutoff and button, where people's opening ranges are wider. If you suspect a player is an okay regular, you can then start 3-bet bluffing against their under the gun and middle position opening ranges. The reason being, although you expect their open raising range to be stronger from under the gun and middle position, if they know that you know that their under the gun raise or middle position open raise is likely to be stronger, then when you 3-bet against their under the gun open range, they may even fold some extremely strong hands. They may fold hands like ace-queen, perhaps even ace-king. They may fold a hand like jacks, tens, just because you are representing so much strength by 3-betting against their under the gun opening range. However, in this spot, if you do get 4-bet, it's likely you have run into the top part of their range. It's likely they will have a hand like aces or kings, maybe even ace-king, although it's definitely not a standard play to 4-bet ace-king when you open under the gun and button 3-bets. We do get 4-bet and we just fold. Table 3, we get 3-bet after we open the 7-8 suited by this player in the big blind, who I assumed was a nit. When he does continuously 3-bet me though, I think he's probably just a decent tight aggressive player. The only other explanation is I'm just constantly running into the top of his range and he keeps picking up aces and kings. But given the frequency he plays back at me during this session, I think it's much more likely he is a tight aggressive but tricky opponent. He's also from Belarus, and it has been said that the majority of really good Hold'em players are from Belarus. Don't ask me why. We open the 7-8 offsuit on table 3. The reason being, although the button is playing back at us some of the time, he has been tight so far. We are treating our cutoff here almost as if it's a second button. We do flop top pair and we c-bet to protect our hand. He does decide to raise the flop, and against most players this would be a pretty standard spot to fold. However, I did strongly get the impression that this player, despite appearing very tight, was playing back at me. It is quite possible that I haven't connected with this flop. My cutoff open range hasn't connected with this flop, and he thinks he can get me to fold my hand a large percentage of the time. But conversely, it's unlikely that he would have connected with this flop. I think it's quite possible he is bluff raising. Against the bluff part of his range, our best option is to flat and let him fire some turns and rivers, and hope he fires multiple streets on the bluff. The turn comes a king of spades, which is not a great card. Some of his bluff raising range may include some king x hands. He also may have been semi-bluffing a spade draw. We check to him with the option of check folding. There are some turns we would be check calling on, the king of spades is probably not one of them. Table 1, we open the 7-4 suited on the button, we get called. The big blind has been folding a lot to c-bet so far. We do flop a gut shot, and it's unlikely the big blind has connected with that board. We're definitely going to fire a c-bet with our 7-4 suited. Back to table 3, when the river comes an ace, our hope is to check it down and hope our 8s are good against any random bluffs or semi-bluffs, such as 9-10 or perhaps a 5-7 type hand. When he bets the river, I think our best option is to fold. I think he might bet slightly bigger with some of his bluffs. This does look like it's a value bet to me. I think the most likely scenario is that he has bluffed me on the flop and he has spiked either a king or an ace on the turn or river. It's highly likely that he might check back the turn with his king x types hands because he expects me to be calling a flop with some of my flush draw type hands. And obviously when I check to him on the river, he wants to go for small value. And the same could be true with an ace. He may have been giving up on his bluff on the turn with some of his ace x type hands, and when I check to him on the river, he figures he can get a small amount of value. So given his bet sizing, I think it's probably for thin value, and the best option here is to fold. Table 1, we are just going to fold the 4-3 suited. Table 2, we have a pocket pair which we plan on playing. We flat with the pocket 2s. We could think about turning it into a bluff, but I've got no reason to suspect this player is folding a lot to 3-bets. He has already called one of our 3-bets in an earlier hand. We probably don't have enough fold equity to 3-bet bluff this pre-flop. When the flop comes 5-7-3 with a flush draw, I don't expect him to be c-betting his overcard type hands as often, and given the fact that there are 3 overcards to our pocket 2s, so even if he is c-betting a flush draw or a hand like ace-jack, he still has reasonable equity against us. Therefore we just check fold with the pocket deuces. Table 4, if it gets folded round to us, we are definitely going to be opening the 9-7 from the small blinds. So far the big blind hasn't played a hand. And hope to take it down pre-flop, which we do. Table 1, we pick up pocket aces. Table 3, we're just going to fold the 9-5. Player on the button has been playing very tight so far. We open raise the aces. The player in the big blind, I did actually play a hand with him before this session began, where he 3-bet his button against me, and I 4-bet bluffed with the queen 10 suited, and he did end up flatting with his pocket jacks. I therefore don't think 4-betting this player as a bluff is generally a good idea, but we definitely want to think about 4-betting for value if we do end up getting 3-bet with our aces. The button opens. I did think about 3-betting, and then I saw that this player in the big blind, who I suspect is a regular, has been 3-betting from the blinds a reasonable amount. If you think it's likely you're going to get squeezed, you can definitely consider flatting some strong hands to set a trap. So I did this hoping the big blind would squeeze, The flop comes 7-3-2 with a flush draw, and I do decide to donk bet this flop. The reason is I think the player on the button is likely to play quite well against a check call or check raise. I think he might fold a hand like pocket 8 to a check raise. I think he's going to play less optimally against a donk bet. I think he may even raise a donk bet with a hand like pocket 8s, which is obviously good for us. He may even bluff raise. When the turn comes a 9, we could definitely consider firing again on the turn. There aren't, however, too many hands in his range that he can continue calling. If he does have a hand like 7x, he may not want to call again, given there's now an overpair on the board. He may also fold some of his flush draws. He may fold any pocket pairs he has. He's definitely folding some of his overcard type hands. However, pretty much any part of this range is very likely to fire the turn when check 2. The reason is he may fire a hand like 7x for protection, expecting it to be good, a decent amount. It's quite possible he's almost definitely firing some of his overpair type hands like pocket 10s, pocket jacks. And he's also quite likely to be firing any of his flush draw type hands if he does have a hand like king queen suited. He can't necessarily expect his hand to be good, but he would definitely want to take a shot at taking it down on the turn and hoping to hit on the river with fold equity. Therefore, I definitely think most of his range, if not all of his range, for flatting the flop is going to be firing on this turn. It's true if he's especially passive, he may decide to check back some of his flush draw type hands, or perhaps some of his one pair hands like 7x, 9x, pocket 8s. And that's pretty much the risk we take by checking the turn to him. It's obviously bad for us if he checks back. He does bet, as I hoped, and I decide to put in a check raise. And the good thing about this is a lot of people interpret this as a bluff because they think, well, you would be firing most of your strong value hands on the turn. Therefore, when you decide to check raise here, people don't generally tend to give you as much credit as perhaps they should. We make it 275 on the turn, which sets up a reasonable stack size for a river shove, around about 2/3 pot. The river comes an ace, which is possibly not a great card for us, in that it may well be a scare card to a lot of his range. It's unlikely he has an ace, now that there are 3 aces out there. A hand like 10s, jacks, queens, 9x, 7x, any of these hands are now less likely to call on the river. We should definitely still shove all in for value, as we only have 2/3 pot left, and hope he does look us up with one of these hands. And if he was slow playing a set, we've obviously now got there. So it's kind of a good river card, but it's also a bad river card because it's now less likely he's going to pay us off with any of his one pair hands. Table 3, we flat 5-4 suited after the player in middle position open min raises, I think, and the button calls. When the player in middle position doesn't c-bet this ace high board, it's quite unlikely he has an ace. It's also very likely that the player on the button is not going to continue with hands that don't have ace-x in them. There may be some, he's probably not folding any flush draws. I definitely think we represent a reasonable amount of strength by betting into 2 people, and we should be able to take this down a reasonable amount of the time. We do also have a gut shot. We are mainly doing this because we think we have sufficient fold equity though. Table 3, we open raise the ace-8 suited from middle position, and although this type player has been giving us some trouble to our immediate left, we do expect him to give us more credit for opening hands from middle position. Although if he is tracking our stats, he can see that we are playing quite loose. Table 1, the cutoff open raises, we flat pocket 4s, and the flop comes King Jack 6. And the player who open raised decides not to fire a c-bet. Table 2, under the gun opens and we have ace queen suited on the button. Under the gun opens to 4x. We can definitely consider folding ace queen suited here. We may be ahead of his range some of the time. A lot of the time we're probably not in that great shape or we're flipping. I decide to call for the sake of the video. But against a 15-12 under the gun open raise, you don't even need to be playing a hand like ace queen suited. Table 1, when the original pre-flop raiser checks to us, we're going to take a stab at this board. It's unlikely the cutoff has a king, otherwise he would be c-betting. He may also be c-betting some of his jacks. It's true the player in the big blind could definitely be checking a king, but he's probably folding a lot of hands that don't have kings in them. If the player in the cutoff does decide to check call, he probably has a hand like maybe some Jack X type hands, maybe a hand like ace queen or queen 10, which he didn't want to c-bet. We decide to bet our pocket 4s on the flop, mainly as a bluff, although we can sometimes get called by worse hands like 10 queen or ace queen. So it's for protection, but it's also a bluff, so we can fold out maybe a hand like pocket 8s, 9s, 10s that don't like this flop. Table 2, when it's checked to us on a 5-7-8 board, we do decide to fire a small bet. The main reason is, one, perhaps sometimes we'll take it down on this board. It's unlikely to hit the pre-flop raiser's open raising range. We also protect our equity against any hands like king queen or king jack suited or ace jack suited, and he may even fold a hand like ace queen if he has that himself, or he may not want to continue with a hand like ace king. I don't think there's any need to bet too big here, and he does decide to check shove, and given the fact that he's open raising a tight range to begin with, it's quite likely he has an overpair here. We should definitely fold. Table 1, we do fire on the flop, hoping to take it down. We don't necessarily need to make it too big here. I think they're probably folding a hand like pocket 8s, whatever size we make it. Table 3, we pick up pocket 8s in the big blind, and it's folded. Table 4, we are definitely going to continue trying to steal from the player in the big blind who has been playing tight so far. The flop isn't great for us. 9-6 jack. I think our best option is to check fold. We don't really have too much equity and there's plenty of hands you can call with. When the turn comes an ace, we could definitely decide to fire for value. I do think maybe it's a little thin. We don't want to be isolating ourselves against better ace type hands. We check to him with the intention of check calling and hope he decides to bluff the ace, which is a good card for him to fire. with some of his air-type hands. When he checks back the turn, we decide to make a small value bet on the river, and when he raises, it's unlikely he is raising a worse hand for value. It's true he may be bluffing some of the time. I think that's less likely, and that against this relatively unknown player, our best option is just to bet fold on that river. And we obviously bet quite small on the river, since there aren't too many worse hands that can call. Table 4, ace-5 offsuit. Definitely want to be stealing this on the button. Table 1, the ace-10 offsuit. We're out of position. Definitely fine to just muck this hand. Table 3, we are folding the jack-8 suited. And table 2, if it's folded round to us, we will be stealing with the 8-6 offsuit. And the same goes for table 3 with the queen 4 offsuit. And on table 2, we do get 3-bet by the big blind, who so far has not 3-bet in 49 hands. It's quite possible we have run into his value range. It's an easy fold with the 8-6 offsuit. We fold the king 10 offsuit on table 4. It's a little bit weak to be opening from middle position, even if you're playing loose aggressive. Table 3, we can just about open the ace 10 offsuit. Table 2, we flat ace king against the middle position open raising range. I do prefer to flat here rather than bet for value, seeing as so far the player in middle position has been opening quite tight, only 9% of hands. We don't want to isolate ourselves against a range we don't do so well against. When the button decides to 3-bet squeeze, he's been playing 50 hands and so far he hasn't 3-bet, and to suddenly 3-bet against a tight middle position open and a cut-off call, it's very likely he's doing this for value, and against his value range, ace-king is not in good shape at all. Also, we're out of position. It's definitely fine to fold the ace-king offsuit here. It may look tight. As it happens, another player on the table re-raises, in which case it's definitely a fold with the ace-king offsuit. But as it stands, we can definitely fold to this first squeeze, since so far this player on the button has not been 3-betting light. Table 3, we open ace 10 offsuit from middle position, and we do get 3-bet by the big blind. Again, we expect his range for 3-betting against a middle position open to be a lot tighter than his range for 3-betting against slightly later positions. This player also has not 3-bet in 45 hands. It's likely he is 3-betting the value part of his 3-bet range. We definitely want to just be folding the ace 10 offsuit here. Table 2, the player in the small blind does decide to shove. Again, if the player on the button, his 3-bet looks strong, then the player in the small blind, his 4-bet here, his cold 4-bet shove here should look even stronger. It's extremely likely one of these two players has either pocket kings or pocket aces. There is really no need to continue with that ace king. Table 1, we're just going to fold to the small blind open raise. He hasn't played a hand yet, and we have 8-4 suited. Table 4, we have ace-jack offsuit. Table 3, again we find ourselves in a situation where we open under the gun. The player in the small blind, who we believe is 3-betting quite tightly so far is a regular. When he 3-bets against our under the gun open raising range, a hand like ace queen is probably behind that range. We definitely should just be folding at ace queen here. It's true we may get slightly better odds now the other player tags along, but a hand like ace queen, which its main strength lies in hitting top pair, top kicker type hands, is a hand which suffers from reverse implied odds. If we had a hand like pocket eights here, we could definitely consider calling now that we have much better odds, much better immediate odds to set mine. With a hand like ace queen, which suffers from reverse implied odds, and it's likely also behind their range, we should definitely consider folding. Table 1 with the 6-4 suited, the big blinds just come to the table. We may as well find out how he's going to be playing immediately and make a steal attempt from the small blind. Our hand does have some potential, but ideally we are just hoping to take it down pre-flop. Table 2, we open raise the ace-4 suited from middle position. The cutoff and button have been playing quite tightly. We should be able to steal a reasonable amount of the time. Sometimes we may get called by the big blind, who has been playing 35-26 so far, in which case our suited ace should play fine in position. We do get called by the button, however, and he's been c-bet once and he didn't fold. I am still going to fire on this board, though it is reasonably dry. Should expect to get some credit for firing this board, and hope he doesn't float. Table 1, we cold call the pocket eights on the button versus the cutoff open raise. The flop comes queen 6-6. If the cutoff is irregular, he is definitely c-betting a queen 6-6 board reasonably often with any of his hands that don't even hit the flop. When the turn comes a king, it's a close decision. We have two options. We can either bet or we can check. The advantage of checking is it's entirely possible the cutoff has played a queen x hand this way, where he bets a value on the flop, and now the turn comes an overcard to his queen x type hands. He decides he wants to check call. So by checking back, we don't value own ourselves against some of his one pair type hands. He also may even play a king x type hand this way for deception. The advantage to betting is we have some fold equity and could take the pot down immediately. We also protect our hand against things like ace jack, any of his flush draws. We also may have some fold equity against some hands that beat us, for example pocket tens, pocket jacks, pocket nines. All things considered, I think the best option is to fire a bet here. Again, it doesn't need to be too large, because if we get check raised here, we are definitely folding. We are mainly betting to protect our hand and hopefully take it down some percentage of the time. Skipping forward again slightly, table 4, we have the queen 8 offsuit, and we do get called by the big blind, who is playing quite tightly so far. When the flop comes 9-4-4, yes, it is a dry board. However, I don't expect to get too much credit when I c-bet. I think it's quite possible the big blind is going to be floating a lot of his pre-flop calling range. If he has a hand like pocket sevens, I don't expect to get too much credit on a 9-4-4 board, especially since if he has been observant, he knows that I am playing quite loose, and therefore I do have a wide range. I decide to check back and hope to improve, which I do. When he donks the turn, and I have now picked up a pair, I should definitely call here. It is possible he can be donking the turn with any of his hands that he wants to take the pot down with. He might have a hand like ace jack. He also may be doing this with a hand like pocket sevens for protection, and maybe to get value from some flush draws or some straight draws. It is possible I have the best hand. When the river comes a 7 and he bets half pot, it's quite a difficult decision. I do end up tanking for quite a while. And the question was, is he really going to be firing this river as a bluff with this bet sizing? If he has a hand like ace jack, is he really going to be firing this river? And the answer I came to was no. I think this is for value, and I think pretty much most of his value hands are going to beat a pair of 8s. There are some draws he could play like this. If he had a hand like 10 jack, he would definitely play like this, although he may bet bigger on the river if he did have a hand like 10 jack on the turn. He could definitely play a hand like 9x this way. He could even play a hand like pocket 10s this way, although I do again think maybe he's betting slightly bigger with overpair type hands, but it's definitely possible he could just bet smaller with these types of hands. Perhaps he realizes that there aren't too many hands that can pay him off on such a board, and so he decides to bet smaller with some of his overpair type hands. I do end up deciding that it's likely that he has a better hand and folding the queen 8. It's close though. Table 3. The cutoff open raises. So far I think the cutoff is irregular. He's playing 21-18 over 60 hands. He has, however, folded to 3 bets 100% of the time so far. We're definitely going to make a 3-bet bluff. King 9, it's not a great hand, but again it's not strong enough to call with. Therefore we can turn it into a 3-bet bluff, and it does have some potential. It can make some weak top pairs. Our main goal is just to take the pot down pre-flop. Table 3, we open raise the Jack 3 offsuit from the button. We do flop second pair, and again the flop is close whether we should fire a c-bet or not. Given the fact that I think the big blind may be a weaker player, and so far he has shown a tendency not to fold to c-bets, I decide to c-bet my jacks for value. Perhaps he can call with any type of flush draw. Maybe he calls with some kind of gut shots like 10 queen, which has a double gutter, or queen king. But also he can easily have better jacks, and he can have aces when he calls. And for this reason I decide to just give up on the turn. The river's obviously a nice card for us. We now pretty much have the nuts, unless he has pocket 8s or pocket aces. When he donks the river for a 5th pot, I think his most likely holding is an ace-x type hand. I think he might bet bigger with a bluff, although some people do occasionally bluff this sizing with a hand like queen king, and they just hope you have nothing, but they realize they probably can't win the pot at showdown. And so, but I think most of the time this is going to be an ace-x type hand. We definitely want to raise for value. And he calls, and he shows ace-4 suited. Table 2, we open raise the pocket aces from the cutoff, and we get 3-bet by the button. And if we look at his stats, we haven't seen too many hands. We've seen 66 hands, but so far he has bet the button once out of 3 opportunities. I don't know for certain, but it's definitely possible he is 3-betting the button light, versus cutoff opens. If he is 3-betting light, our best option is to flat. This way, if he is semi-bluffing a hand like Queen Jack suited or some type of suited ace, we keep these hands in his range and allow him to fire a c-bet on the flop with these types of bluff hands. By 4-betting, he obviously folds these hands and only continues with the hands he is 3-betting for value, which is obviously not a disaster since we have the nuts and can profitably get all the money in. However, it might be higher EV in this case to flat and let him bluff some flops. The flop comes Queen Jack 3, which is not a great board for us. It definitely does hit some of his range. He could have a hand like pocket jacks or queens, he was 3-betting for value. He could have a hand like King 10, which now has an open ender. He could also have hands like Ace Queen and Ace Jack, pocket kings, pocket tens, all of which we beat. He could also still have any of the bluff part of his range, which can include perhaps some suited aces or some suited kings. He could have some suited connectors which have totally missed that flop. He could have some that have hit if he was 3-betting a hand like 10-9 suited for the open ender. So while sometimes he has hit that flop strongly with his value range, it's likely we still have the best hand. Given the fact that he does have a piece of this flop a reasonable amount of the time, our plan is going to be to make a small check raise on the flop for value, to get value from any of his draws, any of his straight draws, any of his one pair hands, also any over pairs like pocket kings. A lot of his range can stack off at this point, and there's no need to give free cards to the draw part of his range. We also bet an amount that allows us to comfortably shove the turn. We perhaps could have made it a little bit bigger, so we are making a slight overbet on the turn here. Therefore we could have made our flop raise slightly larger, so this isn't an overbet on the turn. So a slight miscalculation there, but either way we are shoving the turn. Unless the turn comes absolutely terrible, we are shoving. And the 8 of hearts, while it does complete the 9-10 part of his hand, he's probably still going to call a shove on the turn with any of his ace queen hands or pocket king hands. So the thing to notice perhaps so far about our tight aggressive style is we're not necessarily getting into huge thin spots after the flop. Most of our additional VPIP and PFR is coming from steal attempts, and these steal attempts and increased stats basically confuse people into thinking we're a lot wider than we are in certain situations. Just because you're playing a lag style, it doesn't necessarily mean you suddenly have to start firing 3 barrels on a bluff every time you miss the flop. Of course, there may be times when it is profitable to fire 3 barrels on a bluff, but for the most part, while we are playing very loose pre-flop, we are significantly tightening up our ranges by the turn and river. For that reason, sometimes the style can be referred to as lag tag. Someone that plays a lot of hands but doesn't necessarily commit post-flop without a strong hand. You will, of course, have to bluff post-flop slightly more often than you would if you were playing a very tight starting range. But this is where hand reading skills come in, so if you know villain's range is weak, then perhaps you have a profitable spot for a bluff. Table 2, we decide to make a raise on this flop. The reason being, I think if we are 3-bet on this 10-10-9 board, it's likely we do not have the best hand and we can comfortably fold. The rest of the time we may be buying ourselves a cheaper showdown. I think it's less likely he is now going to bet the turn with any of his overcard type hands, or perhaps any of his draws. The Jack isn't a great card. He does complete some of his draws, such as the Jack Queen or the 7-8 if he had such hands. It also completes the Queen King for the straight. Jack Queen has a pair, obviously. We do turn the nut flush draws, so we are definitely calling given the price we're getting. And on the river, again, I don't think we have the best hand very often at all, but we are getting a great price on a call, so I do decide to make the call. Perhaps you can still fold here. I think it can never be too terrible given the price you're getting to make the call, and hope he just has some random hand. Table 4, we open raise the pocket aces on the button, and we get called by the big blind, who is quite possibly a weaker regular. We definitely want to bet the monotone 3-5-2 board to protect our hands, maybe get value from one card flush draws, some types of worse overpairs. And pretty much the same situation exists on the turn. We don't want to give a free card to any of his one card flush draws, and we continue to get value from any of his overcard type hands by betting. The river is the ace of clubs, which obviously gives us trips, but it is still a very bad card. There's now 4 cards to a straight on board, and there is 4 cards to a flush on board. We can't really ever bet for value here because we are pretty much only getting called by flushes, and maybe once in a while getting called by a straight. Our only option really here on this river is to check back and hope our hand is good. Table 2, as I said, I do make the crying call. I think possibly it's a fold. It's quite tough to think of many worse hands he can have, apart from maybe a worse 9 or something. Maybe it's a fold, but we are getting a great price on a call, so I do make the call. Table 4, we open raise the ace-jack offsuit from the cutoff. Table 1, we make a steal attempt from the button with our king 10 offsuit. Table 4, we are probably going to fold the queen 10 off in middle position. When we're playing a loose aggressive style, we still generally want to be quite tight from under the gun and middle position. It's mainly on the button and cutoff we can really start to get very loose, possibly opening any 2 cards from the button, and also the small blind in some cases. And the cutoff we can open wide, usually if the button is not going to be giving us too much hassle. If the button is a complete nit, we can start opening almost any 2 from the cutoff, maybe not quite any 2, probably going to fold a lot of our ragged hands anyway, but anything with potential we can start opening from the cutoff if the button is super tight. Table 2, we open the queen jack suited. It's pretty close on the flop. We do have second pair. I decide I prefer betting here. There are some worse hands you can call, some draws. The only problem is they will be difficult to play on the turn and river out of position, which is one argument for check calling. I think betting is the best option. Table 4, we flat the 10s. We definitely could choose to 3-bet for value. The flop comes ace 8-3. Our plan is to check call the flop. He checks back, the turn comes a queen, and obviously that's another overcard for our hand. And when he bets pot, we are just going to check fold the turn. Table 2, we open raise the ace-6 offsuit from the button. I don't think we're getting too many folds on the queen-jack-7 flop with the flush draw. I decide I'm just going to check it down and hope my ace-high is good. Table 4, we just open raise a 7-3 offsuit. The big blind has been playing 12-6 so far. We're definitely just opening any 2 against this big blind. Table 2, we open raise the 8-9 offsuit from the cutoff. We do make it 2.5x. The reason being, if the button folds, we have a good shot at taking down the pot. However, I have a feeling the button is going to be playing quite loose, although I don't really have anything to base this on, apart from he played his first hand, and he does 3-bet this time, so I will be keeping my eye out for him. He may just have run into hands, of course, but I think he may be playing looser than most people. Table 4, we open raise the queen-6 offsuit from the button. The big blind calls, and the flop is ace-jack-7. I think this is usually a good board to fire a c-bet on. It's ace-high. I think he's likely folding any of his pocket pair type hands. His calling range on the flop includes hands like ace-x, jack-x, maybe some gut shots like queen-king, 10-queen. The turn goes check-check. I think on the turn he is leading a lot of his ace-x hands, unless they are the weaker part of his ace-x hands, such as a hand like ace-5, he's perhaps check-calling the turn with. When he leads this river, it's a little bit tough, but thinking about his bet sizing, I don't think this is a bluff. I think he's mainly betting just under half pot here for value most of the time. And his value range pretty much includes any weak ace-x he doesn't want to donk bet the turn with. And it also includes any queen-x hands, all of which beat has, for example, 10-queen or queen-king, which had gut shots on the flop. I don't think he ever has a jack-x hand here, because I think it's pretty much too weak for him to value bet. I think he's either check calling or check folding his jack-x type hands. Therefore, after tanking for a while, I think I am behind his range and fold with a queen-6. Table 2, we do end up marking this player as loose aggressive. Again, we don't have many hands to base this on. It's just that out of 5 hands he's played 4 so far, and he's played 2 of them aggressively. He's 3-bet once out of 3 opportunities. Again, it could be a coincidence, but with the information we have collected so far, it seems likely that he is going to be playing very loose and very aggressive. Therefore, when we pick up 10-jack suited on the button, we just come in for a min raise. Usually this will mean their 3-bet size is small if they do 3-bet. Therefore we can more comfortably call with a hand like 10-jack suited. In this case, the big blind does 3-bet and he doesn't actually adjust his 3-bet size. After we open min raise, you might expect him to make it 3 times min raise size, and therefore 3-bet to 60 cents or 70 cents. He does make it 90 cents, which either means he's not aware of our smaller raise size, or perhaps he is just raising because he has a strong hand. If he'd raised smaller, I probably would call with a 10-jack suited. Against his 4.5x 3-bet, then we are just going to fold. Table 3, we open the 9-3 offsuit, just continuing to relentlessly steal the blinds. On table 3, we could consider opening the ace-4 offsuit, since the button has been tight, although this is the player I said was possibly playing back at me. It may just be a coincidence that he is picking up hands. Table 4, we are probably just folding the 8-6. The button is probably a fish though. He has been playing 50-30 over 33 hands so far. Seems to be quite aggressive, quite loose. There's no need to play a hand like 8-6, however. On table 2, this player to our left continues his aggression, open min raising from the cutoff. Table 4, we are folding the Jack-8 unless it's folded to us, in which case we are going to make a steal attempt against the 10-5 big blind. Table 1, you can consider just limping behind certain hands with potential, especially if you think the player you are in position on is a fish, and so far it looks like he might be. Sometimes hands like this will play better in a multi-way pot. You definitely can just think about ISO raising, even with a hand as weak as Queen 4 suited, but limping behind some of the time is fine. It's also fine with some of your pocket pair type hands, especially if there are aggressive players behind you who will 3-bet and you therefore have to fold your smaller pocket pairs. In general, you shouldn't be open limping too many hands, but limping behind is usually a fine strategy with certain hands. Table 3, we open the Ace-10 offsuit on the button. And we get 3-bet by this player in the small blinds, who apparently has been giving me some trouble. Either he's just running into hounds, or he's picking some good spots to play back against me. I definitely could consider a 4-bet here. I usually don't 4-bet as often when I've made my open raise 2.5x. The reason being is I think the small blind is more likely to interpret my 4-bet as a bluff, given the fact that I only open raise to 2.5x. A lot of the time, if I'm planning on 4-betting a trash hand, I will open raise to 3x. I'd much rather be 4-betting a hand like pocket aces after I open raise for 2.5x, just because I think my 4-bets will be perceived as lighter when I make them after I've open raised 2.5x from the button. It's possible this makes no difference to the player on table 3, however, and you can definitely consider a 4-bet bluff with your Ace-10 offsuit. You have some blockers to the good hands you can have, like Ace-King or pocket aces. You also have some equity, of course, against hands like queens or kings, which he might be 3-betting for value. But mainly you'd be doing it for your fold equity, if you think he's 3-betting light enough. Skipping forward, we pick up pocket aces on table 1 and make a standard open raise from middle position. The big blind, who is playing 18-12 over 33 hands, cold calls. The flop comes 7-5-5, and we definitely want to c-bet this board. There's no need to bet too big though. We do want to induce calls from any of his overcard type hands, some of his smaller overpairs also. And on a paired board, we don't need to worry about people hitting things like runner 2 pair. So as long as he doesn't have the 5, it's a good board for us. We definitely want to fire the turn again for value. It's possible some of his floats include Jack-X type hands. He may call again with some of his pocket pair type hands. Perhaps he even floats again with some of his overcards, although possibly less likely. I don't think he's folding a hand like pocket 10s to another bet, or maybe even pocket 8s, 9s. Perhaps he calls again with a 7x hand, although there might not be too many 7x hands in his big blind cold calling range. The river comes a jack, and this is a standard spot where pretty much your brain will be screaming at you, don't fire for value, he might have a jack. When in actual fact, while he sometimes may have a jack, his range is a lot wider than that. Also, the fact that a jack hits the river means he's less likely to put us on a jack. He knows we don't have the jack of spades as one of our whole cards. This jack therefore makes it much more likely that he is going to call another street with any of his worse overpair type hands like pocket tens, pocket nines, pocket eights, maybe pocket sixes, and of course pocket queens, pocket kings. So while sometimes he's hit a lucky runner full house with his king jack suited type hands, or maybe his ace jack suited type hands, most of the time this river is going to allow us to get another street of value because he thinks it's less likely we have a jack. We should definitely be firing this river for value. Our plan is to fold to a raise. I think it's unlikely he is ever raising any of his pocket pair type hands here. Pretty much the only hand I expect him to raise on this river is a jack X type hand, so we can comfortably bet fold. And he calls and mucks pocket eights. I think that's pretty much it for this session. Please leave any comments or feedback you have in the thread, and feel free to ask any questions. This has been Weasel making the third video in the Beating the Micro series. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you guys soon.